The biggest question that we know is on everyone's mind is when can we come back? The answer is we don't have a date for when the fires will be declared under control by ECC and when it will be safe for community governments and the territory to welcome their residents. The minute the evacuations were complete and people were safe, the GNWT began working with community governments to plan for you to come home when the time comes and when it is safe to do so. It was a monumental task to get everyone out, and it's going to require a thoughtful and staged approach to bring everyone back. I know you have questions about what it will look like when the time comes so that you can make plans for yourself, your family, and quite frankly, your own mental health. So much of this emergency has been unpredictable and out of all of our control. It's been hard for all of us to wait and wonder what comes next. I want to stress again that we are still actively battling wildfire across our territory, and we are not out of this emergency. Jessica will be giving you an update in just a moment on the latest from wildfires, but in many communities, nothing has reopened and evacuation orders remain in place. It is not yet time to head for home. Today, our hope is that by giving you a sense of what to expect when the time comes, you will be prepared when communities can finally give the word to come home. First, please know that when it happens, it won't happen instantly. When we come back, we won't all come back at once, but we will come back the right way. Coming back involves 5 phases, and I want to let you know what those 5 phases are. Phase 1 is when the community is safe from wildfire. We will continue to rely on the team at Environment and Climate Change to tell us when the fires are deemed under control and it is safe to go back. We recognize that the timing for this can look very different from one community to another. Once they determine that the risk for the community has decreased, including access to the community in terms of travel, air quality, and a number of other considerations, they will advise when it is safe to go in and check for damage. That leads us to phase 2, checking for damage. This phase is about checking for damage in the community. We know not all communities will have fire damage. Some will need to do damage assessments on individual structures, and this is difficult to predict since the wildfires, as mentioned before, are still very active. For those communities that didn't have any fire reach their structures, this phase is an example where it might be more straightforward. Community governments will be looking at whether the equipment being used for structural protection is impacting anything to ensure that those issues are managed before bringing people back. For areas that experienced more damage, it may be a more involved process. We will be working with community governments to do these damage assessments and to assist where we can provide some understanding about what supports are needed and what needs to be put in place before we can bring essential people back to their community. Phase 3, that involves the essential personnel return. We have already had essential personnel in the territory who were needed for the response in fighting the wildfires and supporting those who are fighting the wildfires. So when the time comes, we will work with communities and community governments to expand that definition to include community services that would be needed before we welcome back the larger population. That leads us then to phase 4, where we reestablish basic services. The reality is that you can't come home to a community without services in place. We are working in partnership with community governments to make sure that when you come back, your community will be ready for you. Community governments can't open without supports in place for when you return home. What am I talking about? Some of these territorial services and many municipal services, hospitals, gas stations, groceries. Those are just a few and not an exhaustive list of the examples that make a community able to support itself. those folks will come back first. The territory will be working with community governments to build these lists and to ensure that people are able to return. And that leads us to phase 5, which is the phase we're all waiting for. As most of you are wondering, how will you come home? The first question is how you travel home. We are working right now on the details around this, and I will tell you that there are still some unknowns, but those details are being worked out. Many of our evacuees are in different cities, and that requires a lot of planning for how we coordinate air travel back for those who flew out. Many of you came via highway, and we need to prepare to make sure we have enough fuel on hand for the amount of travelers that we will have, to ensure that the roads are safe and passable. As I mentioned, fire continues to impact the territories, including our roads. And we may have to look at whether we stagger the dates of travel to ensure we don't end up with congested routes that still are needed for wildfire response in other areas. So what I'm saying is there is still a lot of work to do before communities with GNWT support can fully outline what the reentry will look like. So that means I have to stress that we're not there yet. We are asking you to hold tight. There is hope on the horizon, but our best efforts have to remain on the health and safety of our communities, our first responders, and on beating these municipal wildfires that are still out there. Let us get out of the woods, literally and figuratively, and then we can start bringing you back in safe and in an orderly way. This phased approach will balance the time required for services to be reestablished with the urgency to get you back home and back to your life. While we wait for the risk to pass, I know it's been a long journey already. If you are struggling, please reach out for emotional and other supports if you need it. We have supports available on our website at gov.nwt.ca, and we are going to get through this together. At the end, we will take some questions, but I want to close and reassure people from the NWT that we will keep sharing as much as we can, when we can, as these plans come together. And I will now turn it over to Jessica, who will give you a wildfire update. Thank you for your time.
Jessica?
Sure. Okay. Hi. Thanks for having me this evening. So I'm going to start in Hay River because that's where I know a lot of us are really looking for information. That fire is 1 kilometer west of the Hay River Airport, or about 1.5 kilometers west of the town center. It has reached Delancey Estates, Paradise Garden, and Patterson Road. It has crossed Highway 5 between kilometers 6 and 20 and several spots on Highway 2 near the Highway 5 junction. Some structural loss has been confirmed west of Hay River near the shores of Great Slave Lake, 2 cabins and a travel trailer. There's also been significant damage in Enterprise, Patterson Road, and Paradise Gardens. Today has been another challenging day with temperatures up to 32 degrees and extremely sorry, that was my cat. Today has been another challenging day with temperatures up to 32 degrees and extremely dry conditions that will cause significant fire activity and could push the fire to the north and the east. We have lighter winds today, but the visibility is very poor, challenging our aircrafts and stymieing our work from the air. Those conditions, combined with the high temperatures, are expected to carry on into Tuesday. There is much work to be done and challenging days in front of us. But we are making strides. Our ignition operations from the ground and the air have held the fire's progress back considerably. Structure protection is working and has saved numerous structures where the fire has encroached. Our crews are continuing to strengthen and shore up those defenses. We continue to build dozer guards, digging away burnable vegetation down to the dirt to create a break in the forest to cut off those fuels towards Hay River and KFN. On the northwest corner of the fire, nearest to Kakiza, we've been tightlining, which means digging away vegetation at the edge of the fire to slow its growth. Another 3 kilometers of this line was completed yesterday, and we will keep expanding it. Our structural firefighters are working on hotspots in fire areas impacted and are at the ready to defend neighborhoods. Around Fort Smith and the Wood Buffalo complex of fires, We saw increased fire behavior yesterday, but no significant growth was recorded. That's really good news for that fire. The most active areas continue to be on the northern side, closest to Tabacha. Heavy smoke lingering actually worked in our favor today. Firefighters believe there would have been more growth without it since it shaded the fire from the sun. Basically, the smoke was an umbrella and it really helped today. Hot temperatures around 30 degrees are expected in that region around Fort Smith today, and that's going to carry on into Tuesday, which could allow for more extreme fire behavior, especially if that smoke isn't helping us out. But like I said around Hay River, our hard work is paying off. Crews completed work to contain spot fires just past the most southern containment line in Fort Fitzgerald, and worked today on a direct attack on the eastern edge of the fire near Hay Camp Road when visibility allowed. Crews also completed the Fort Smith containment line yesterday. It's 100 meters long, extending from Highway 5 just south of Bordertown along Pine Lake Road. That's an immense accomplishment to keep that community safe. And there is good news across the rest of the territory. There were no new fires overnight or today. That's a big one when we have as many fires as we do. The fire outside of Jean Marie River is now about 80% contained, even with poor visibility today in the area, making it hard for our crews to get in the air. That, again, great news. We have our incident commander who will be able to provide more information and details about the situation in the North Slave region. But I will say, several of the fires threatening our communities have now been classified as being held. Incident Commander Ray can tell you more, but what that means is that with our current resources and suppression actions, these fires are not likely to spread beyond their existing boundaries as long as conditions on the ground do not change. That, again, is good news. It's not the best news that these fires are under control and we can go home, but it's one step closer to the news we all want. However, I will reiterate once again, it bears repeating, this does not mean the danger has passed. The evacuation order remains, and until that is lifted, it is not safe for anyone to return who has been evacuated. We're going to get through this. Our crews are making tremendous strides. And not to go all north of the wall on you, but winter is coming. I'll pass it back to Agatha now.
Thanks, Jessica. Alrighty, so now we will move on to Fane Ray for a North Slave fire update. Fane?
Hi, so good afternoon. So a quick update on the North Slave fires. As of this afternoon, you did hear for Fire 15, which is classified as being held. Fire 11 is being classified as being held, along with Fire 12 and 85 still listed as out of control. So over the general region right now, we do have 325 personnel working the fires. Various aircraft between fixed wing and rotary wing, which we have about 14 at this time. So just a little more in depth into Fire 15. So over the last 7 days, we've made pretty good strides in that fire. We've contained probably about 50 meters from the perimeter in towards the fire. We are still seeing some areas come up within the fire itself that are going to burn off, but we're not too worried about those areas at this point as it's well within the burn. So should be no concern, but still continue to put up a lot of smoke. So basically off of the north part of the lake, extending up the east side of the fire up to the northeast corner, our crews have made very good strides. From the last amount I heard, they had already laid out about 15 to 16 kilometers of hose line. So again, being backed with helicopters and air tankers, they've made pretty good success on that fire. We did have an opportunity to fly the fire yesterday. Things were looking very good right across the fire. I know near the community of Betchico, there was very little for fire behavior in that area. But again, with the weather and the warmer temperatures and wind, we do see some of those islands within the fire that are going to be burning off. But well within sight, so it doesn't affect the perimeter. So things have been progressing very well on that fire. Another fire of note is Fire 11, which is to the northeast of the Yellowknife and north of the Ingham Trail. We did have an opportunity to fly that fire. We do have additional resources working that fire along the western, southern, and eastern flanks of the fire. They have made very good progress there. We did have a scan completed this morning, which showed very little for fire behavior along the perimeter, and we haven't seen no growth on that fire over the last 7 days. So things have continued to progress very well there. Between Fire 12, which is further north, we've monitored the fire over the last 7 days. We've seen no growth. It has tied into some natural breaks. Thus being said, water and just some outlying rock crops, so it hasn't grown at all. We'll continue to monitor that, and we'll watch for any values that are in the area. So that's where we're sitting with that fire at this time. Over to the southwest of the city of Yellowknife, and Deta, which is the Fire 85. We did have our operations fly the fire yesterday afternoon. There was no significant growth on the fire. There were some areas along the eastern portion and on the western portion of the fire that did show a little bit of fire behavior, but nothing that did breach the line. So things are looking very well there. And we'll just continue to monitor those two fires. That's about the latest I have, and thank you.
Thanks very much, Fane. Now to Kieran Testart for a Yellowknife's Dene First Nation update.
Masi. Tonight, I have the privilege of speaking on behalf of the Yellowknife's Dene First Nation, here from Chief Dragi's territory, the sovereign homeland of the Yellowknife's Dene. Our emergency operations team has been working hard to ensure the safety of the community and its members. Each day, our frontline workers have been performing fire smarting operations, deploying and testing sprinkler lines, and ensuring that our evacuated members have the support and resources that they need. Safety has been a top priority for us. Safety checks by staff are done twice daily at each house in Deta and Dilo, supplemented by patrols from the RCMP and additional patrols from our private security partners. We can ensure our members that there have been no incidents. Your homes and property are very safe. We know that returning to their homeland is the #1 priority for the Yellowknife's Dene. To ensure we are ready, we have begun the re-entry phase of our operations, and we are working hand in hand with the City of Yellowknife to ensure the safe return of our essential workers, elders, and community members. Our plan will follow closely to the City of Yellowknife's re-entry plan to ensure we have access to the critical resources and essential services required for the communities of Deta and Dilo. We are making good progress towards our goal on returning YKDFN members home without delay. I also wish to address a matter of great importance to all of our members who've been patiently awaiting financial relief during these trying times. I understand that the wait has been challenging, and we want to express our sincere appreciation for your understanding and resilience. The magnitude of this unprecedented situation has brought forth unforeseen challenges to the First Nation government. The resources and systems in place were not designed to manage such a crisis of this scale. As a result, there have been delays in providing the financial assistance that have been allocated to support our members. We are asking for continued patience and understanding as we work diligently to address this matter. Rest assured that your needs remain at the forefront of our priorities, and we are committed to finding swift and equitable solutions. We are actively engaging with various agencies and partners to secure the necessary funding mechanisms and resources to alleviate the financial burden that this situation has placed on you and your families. Our commitment to your well-being and security remains steadfast, and we are determined to make sure that the support reaches you without further delay. I also want to mention that this has been an unprecedented situation for our First Nations government and its staff. Our frontline workers and those who have been working remotely have done an incredible job working long hours for many days. There have been many learnings, and YKDFN would like to say a big masi cho to our frontline workers. YKDFN would also like to recognize and thank the City of Yellowknife, the Department of Municipal and Community Affairs, the RCMP, the Canadian Coast Guard, Canada Task Team 2, and all the other agencies for their support during this difficult time. Masi cho.
Thanks very much, Kieran. Now to Sheila Bassi-Kellett for a City of Yellowknife update.
Thanks very much, Aggie, and hello, everyone. So today we heard that the two fires of most concern to Yellowknife and the surrounding area are considered by ECC, Environment and Climate Change, to being held. This is awesome news, and we're all really, really happy to hear this. On behalf of the city, I would like to once again offer a huge thanks to everyone, the firefighters, both the structural and our wildland firefighters, the contractors, all the workers, everyone who has done so much to protect Yellowknife so far. But as ECC folks have shared, it doesn't mean the risk is gone yet. We know there are lots of factors that are going into declaring our community safe for people to start returning. We're not there yet. But we have been doing a lot of work, and we certainly have been working with GNWT as the GNWT develops their approach to bringing Yellowknife and all evacuees home. We're supportive of the framework that has just been presented, and we're pleased that our residents now have an idea of what they can expect. Yellowknife's been very fortunate that we have so far not had fire damage within city limits. So while we were prepared with a critical infrastructure assessment plan, no fire damage means that we're going to be able to skip the check for damage phase of this plan that was laid out by Jay. Over the past week, we've been doing a lot of work to get prepared for your return, for the return of all Yellowknife residents. And so while our partners at the NWT are considering what it will take to get you here, our focus is on making sure that we're ready for you when you arrive. One of the things we're doing right now is getting ready for stage 3, which is returning essential workers to be able to provide critical services. And this is a really important step. So right now, there are very few people in the city, ballpark 1,600, so we've been told, and most are really fully dedicated to the emergency response. So before all 20,000 of our friends and family are able to come back, we need to make sure that certain things are in place so that we're taking a phased approach to ensure this. So first of all, essential workers, basically everyone who provides the critical services we need, are going to return home first, so there's support for reentry into the community. This is crucial because we need to make sure that Stanton and the Northwest Territories Health Authority can offer medical services. We've got to make sure the grocery stores are stocked and staffed for all of us. Gas stations are equipped to support everyone to come home. And of course, at the city, we're also prepping our essential services, the water treatment plant, the solid waste facility, and we're also asking our essential staff to join the rest of us who have been here throughout. So once the basic critical services are up and running, we're going to have them to a basic level, and it's not going to be complete and it's not going to be pretty, but it'll be enough to be able to welcome everyone home because we want to do this as quickly as possible. Then the GNWT, with input from Environment and Climate Change on the fire risk, and of course from the city, will be in the position to lift the evacuation order for Yellowknife that's currently in effect. All Yellowknifers are going to be able to take the steps then to be able to return home by air or by road. And of course, GNWT will be sharing more information on this process. When we hear it, we'll be amplifying that message as well, so everybody can really get a good understanding of how they're going to be getting home. I know everyone is just anxious to come home, and we can't wait to welcome you back. But an orderly return is important so we can get you back home and get you back to normal life as safely as possible. It's been a really challenging time for all of us, but we're Yellowknifers and we're a resilient bunch, and we know that we can reach out to support when we need it, to each other, to healthcare providers, to anyone who we feel we need to touch base with. So to wrap up, we know there's still a lot of work ahead, and reentry is a pretty complicated thing, but today's news is a really encouraging step. And as more information becomes available in the upcoming days about how you will get home, I want you to know that we here at the city are going to be ready for you. As we develop the more granular elements to our reentry plan, we'll be sharing them publicly.
Sheila, you froze, so I don't know if you're... Sorry, Sheila, you froze in that last bit, but I think you were already concluding your remarks.
I think I was. I just want to say that when people are coming home, we will be ready to welcome them home with open arms. Thanks.
Perfect. Thanks, Sheila. Alrighty, so now we are going to move on to the question period, starting with NWT Media. So on the line, I have Natalie, Claudienne, and Juanita from CBC North. Who's going to be asking the questions today?
I believe that's me. It's Natalie speaking.
Hi, Natalie. Go ahead.
Yeah, with those 2 North Slave fires that are now being classified as held, I guess with the Hay River fire, my understanding is that that was the same distance from the town for a little while, and then we had that blow up event a couple of days ago. And so I'm just wondering, you know, what is different with these North Slave fires, or how can we be sure that something like that won't happen?
Shane, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So basically over the last 7 days with the weather that we've been seeing here, it's been a little bit cooler temps. We have had, moderate amounts of rain. I'm not thinking, saying in the 5 to 10 mils range, but over certain days we did have up to 1 mil, 2 mils, or 3 mils. So that's helped out significantly on the fires. It's brought up the RH. It's lowered the temperatures, and we've seen a bit of decrease in winds, but also at times high winds, but they've always been in our favor. As I mentioned earlier, when I did brief over this past couple of days, we've been able to get on the line. It's allowed us to do it safely with the support of our aircraft, our ground crews, and then everything else behind it. So we've made up significant ground in some of those areas along the fire. And like I'd said before, we're working 50 meters into the fire, so that's eliminating some of that potential for spread back towards the community. The fire still sits at about 15 kilometers from the city of Yellowknife, as also Fire 11 does sit about 20 kilometers to the northeast. But again, we haven't seen no significant growth. The weather's been on our side, and a significant amount of resources working on these fires at this current time.
Thanks, Vane. Natalie, do you have another question?
I do. I believe this will be for Sheila Bassey-Khaled, but of course, I'm sure you'll direct me if I'm wrong. Just about the phased approach to reentry, and again, I understand that it's not time for that yet, but when residents are invited to return home, I'm not understanding who of the Yellowknife residents will go first and how that's all decided and how that'll be communicated.
Sure. Sheila, go ahead.
Thanks. Well, I can speak to certainly how we're looking at identifying essential service personnel at this point in time. The city's coordinating that work, and we're working with local businesses to identify who's critical in that area. We're identifying as well, as I mentioned, city staff who are critical. We're also working with the NWT and other providers such as Stanton, RCMP, others who are identifying critical staff. In terms of how people get back to Yellowknife, that's something that NWT is coordinating, but we're really working to make sure that we get those critical staff back in, critical personnel in, so that we've got a base level of services when everybody returns. So perhaps I'll turn it to Jay, who can speak to the plan for how people will be returning. Thanks.
Go ahead, Jay.
So what I would say that is that in phase 3, the communities are identifying their essential personnel, the GNWT are identifying their essential personnel, and then those folks will be sent information about their return and the details of how and when. And so that would be in phase 3. Those essential services and those essential workers are expected to help with phase 4, which is establishing basic services to be up and ready to accept people when they come back. And then it will be into stage 5 of returning home. And again, people who flew will fly home. People who went by highway will go by highway. If you came by highway but do not have a road home, you will be able to fly home. But what I can say about that is that the best thing that residents can do to make sure that they are connected is to register with the evacuation center that is in their community if they haven't already done that, the community where they are staying, especially if they've moved communities. Even if they registered once, it is an excellent idea to be registered with the evacuation center closest to you. If you can't do that, the next piece of advice I would give you is to register on the evacuation portal that you can find links to on the Government of Northwest Territories website. If you are not able to do both of those things, then I would just encourage you to pay close attention to GNWT announcements and updates, because you will find information there about how to get connected and how to plug into the reentry program. So these details are literally being worked on in the room next to me right now, and we are expecting more details to come. As we have committed today, we will share with you details as we have them when they are ready for you. And
like the mute button is over here, the unmute button.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, do I need anything from here?
Juanita, please mute yourself.
You want to ask?
No.
Sorry, go ahead, Jay.
So we are committed to doing this as safely as possible, but also as soon as possible. Safety comes first, but we know people are anxious.
Thanks, Jay. All right, I will move along now to Ethan at My True North now. Hi, Ethan, do you have a question?
It's Connor from My True North now.
Sure.
For people who will be returning by highway with this phased approach, how will it be made sure that they don't try to return ahead of schedule? And if they do, will they just be turned away at the border?
Sure, Jay, I'll throw this one to you, but we might also want to have Matt say something here as well.
Yes, until we tell people that it is time, until it is safe, the current status of the highways being closed and check stops being in place and barricades being up continues. And we really want to stress this point that it is not time now, and that you really do create difficulty for the people who are working hard to try and create a reentry program and the resources that are trying to make sure everything is ready for reentry. People who try to reenter before it is time create delays, create problems. And we really just want to encourage people. We know how hard this is to wait and how hard it is to be patient. But to be fair to your friends, to be fair to your neighbors, to be fair to your community, everybody deserves to be safe and for an equal opportunity to return home. And that's what we're working on. So yes, until it is time to come home, the current status is in place. There are check stops, there are barriers, and yes, people would be turned away if they are not essential workers and have not been told to come home.
Thanks, Jay. Do you have a follow-up?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Eric at NNSL, do you have a question?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Just curious here, just because there was an incident over the weekend about somebody being in Yellowknife who was may or may not have been authorized to be. We haven't quite really figured this out yet. But I'm wondering if RCMP are investigating any other complaints other than Katrina Knockleby that of people being in the city that are not supposed to be.
Okay. Matt Halstead?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any other investigations ongoing with respect to that issue. Thank you.
Eric, do you have another question or a follow-up?
I do. So I'm just wondering here, so what is the criteria to actually get oneself investigated for being in Yellowknife without being required, without authorization? Is it just simply that somebody outside the city or somebody in the city makes a complaint? Yeah.
Matt?
Yes, I'm not really able to provide the specific criteria for everything, but yes, typically if we receive a complaint, we have an obligation to open an investigation. That's what's happened here, and we'll follow up as needed. We've been pretty clear that for the people that have remained, that we've taken a different approach with that, and that's maintained as long as there's no risk to public safety. But yeah, we have an obligation when we receive complaints to open investigations. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. All right, moving along now to Daryl at APTN. Hi, Daryl. Do you have a question? No? Okay. Emily or Ollie at Cabin Radio?
Yep, thanks, Agatha. It'll be me. This question will be for the mayor or for the city manager, Sheila Bassey-Kellett. A couple of critical staff have told me their return to work date is September 5th, and I should stress for anyone watching that I haven't been able to independently verify that. Is that date correct? If so, is that date the same for all critical staff contacted so far, or is there a sequence of dates for that very specific phase of calling back critical staff? Thank you.
Sure. Sheila?
Thanks very much for the question, Ollie. We're in the process right now of identifying our critical staff. And again, it's for those really core services. We anticipate, of course, water, sewer, solid waste facility. We know people will be cleaning out their fridges. They'll have a lot of, old produce and things like that they're going to need to get rid of. We know that that's a top priority. So we've been reaching out to our staff. We started doing that yesterday. We want to find those essential staff to get them home as quickly as we can. So that process is underway. We haven't set a date specifically like that, but the process has started. And so we're hoping to get them home as quickly as we can. Thanks.
Thanks, Sheila. Do you have a follow-up, Ollie?
Yeah, when I spoke to Sheila and to the mayor last week, you both told me that it would be, under the current plan at the time, 5 days from the first critical staff coming back to the more broad recall of residents. Is that still the case? Is that still the anticipated plan?
We're trying to be as ambitious as we can, but there's a lot of factors with this. So, for example, if we have called back some of our critical staff, and we know Stanton is in the process of doing so, we want to make sure that essential businesses are able to do so. It may be that some of those staff are driving back. It might be that some are flying back. So there'll be a time period that they need to be able to get back home. We know we heard very much that the state of the road in the South Slave coming into Yellowknife is of concern. So if people are driving back, we want to make sure that they're safe. We want to make sure that people come back are able to just do a quick, reconnaissance of their own home before we ask them to come and start serving residents. So a lot of these factors are in play right now, and we want to make sure that we're able to support people, our essential staff and essential workers, to return safely, get things up and running, to then trigger the broader call where we'll go to the GNWT and request the evacuation, that we'll recommend to the minister that the evacuation order could be lifted. But there are a number of those factors as we try to pull staff back from where they are, depending on how they're getting back and how we can support them to get back safely.
Thanks, Sheila. Jay, do you want to add to this as well?
Yeah, there's just a couple of things I want to say, and we really discourage people. We understand why people are curious about details and dates and numbers, but you really do have to be careful about rumors. And I understand that the part of the questions that we get here are to help dispel these rumors. I think what can happen is discussions to help people be prepared, especially essential workers. Discussions happen where hypotheticals and possibilities are discussed in the planning process. But that's why it's really important to wait until there's a final decision made, because if you're taking details out of planning and discussions, you aren't getting a final answer. And that final answer will be the correct answer. So absolutely, we're here to answer questions and to clarify misinformation and clarify rumors. But if you're wondering how these dates and rumors happen, I would guess in some cases it's an honest mistake coming from discussions about planning as opposed to taking a final decision.
Yeah. Thanks, Jay. Kimberly, do you want to add to this as well? Your hand's up.
Yeah, thanks, Aggie. I just wanted to clarify that for Stanton, we are in that planning phase of identification of those workers that would need to be recalled for reentry. We have not actually taken the step of initiating recall, aside from, of course, employees who are required to keep the emergency department functioning in its current state.
Thanks, Kimberly. All right, moving along now to Ian Down at CKLB. Ian, do you have a question?
Yes, hi. My first question is for Jessica. So I understand that a few weeks ago there was damage to the Paradise Gardens and Patterson Road areas. I'm just curious, the damage that's being reported in the updates now, is that new to within the last 3 days?
Jessica?
Hi, yes, that's my understanding that this is new damage that's been reported since we had that flare up on Friday, Saturday. Again, we are still assessing the situation. Visibility has been quite low, and our crews have been busy working on protections, but we should have more updates coming soon in the coming days with more concrete details about any more structure loss and what the fire's damage has actually been. It's an evolving situation right now, so unfortunately we have to wait a minute. But yes, that to answer your question, my understanding is that the damage we're now reporting is new as of kind of this weekend in this latest incident.
Jessica, do you have a follow-up, Ian?
Yes, my second question, I believe, is for somebody with Department of Finance. So the Tenants Association of the Northwest Territories, they released an open letter a couple days ago just with some calls to action for the GNWT, and that includes emergency rent relief for all tenants, legal protections from evictions, and subsidies on utility charges. Now, I understand this question might have to go to more than one person, but I'm curious, are any of these supports being considered?
Sure. Bill, can you speak to this one?
Yeah, thanks, Aggie. We have seen the resolution and we're considering it. I mean, we did announce some supports for evacuees, and we understand that those supports don't cover all financial losses that evacuees are experiencing. So we're continuing to monitoring the situation, and of course, people that are having problems paying their rent is part of the struggles that we're aware of and that we're considering, but we don't have any specific plans to address that at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, did I miss any Northern media? Is there any other NWT media on the line? No? Okay, so I am going to open it up now to Southern media, so please just raise your hand. And I see here, Quinn, go ahead.
Hi there, Quinn from CKHR in Hay River. On Friday, we heard that all military personnel were evacuated from Hay River. Why was the decision made to pull them out rather than have them remain to support the firefighters on the ground?
Sure. Jay, can you speak to this one?
I mean, the answer for how how JTFN and D&D makes their decisions about deploying their personnel would have to go directly to them.
Yeah. Do you have another question?
Yeah. Can you hear me again?
Yep.
Okay. Given that Hay River has seen multiple days of what's categorized as extreme fire behavior, is there any plan to redistribute some of the assets in Yellowknife to help Hay River?
Sure. Jay? Or Jessica, your hand is up. Maybe I'll let both of you speak to this one.
Sure.
Go ahead, Jessica.
I can just say on behalf of the fire service, all the resources are deployed based on danger and risk and available work. It's also kind of why the military, is my understanding, is part of why they were removed. They're assessing what work needs to get done and who needs to do it. Firefighting isn't just send every guy you have out with a chainsaw. That's not how that works. You need specialized skills in specialized areas, and if you don't have those, then you're just more, you're not being effective. So my understanding is that, again, with equipment and with resources, those are moved around as needed amongst the regions, but that is going to be done based on assessment of risk for all those communities and make sure that all of our communities are as protected as we can make them.
Sure. Thanks, Jessica. All right. Eric, your hand is up. Go ahead, Eric.
Yes. So I'm just wondering, just kind of following up on before, I understand that there was a letter sent out to volunteers who have been sticking around Yellowknife over the last little while to help out, and asking them to please evacuate because the city's defenses have been more or less set up. So I'm wondering, I know at least a few people who have stuck around the volunteer have said they aren't leaving. I'm wondering how they will be handled by under the evacuation order.
Sure. Jay, can you speak to this one?
Sure. I think the city may want to also weigh in on this, but from an EMO perspective, while we absolutely appreciate the efforts that volunteers make, it is important for the work that is being done that there not be interruptions. Also, providing service to the people who are currently in our communities is a bit of a challenge. And so we ask that people who are not supporting the forest firefighters or directly involved in fighting the forest fire, it is best for them and safest for everyone and best for the efforts to continue to work towards re-entry and fighting the fires and all the activities that are currently going on, that they evacuate if they can safely do so. If there are reasons why they cannot safely evacuate, they should get in touch with officials and make those reasons known. This in no way diminishes the efforts that they've made and the contributions that they've made. We would just hate for someone to not have the services they need or to find themselves in an unsafe situation unnecessarily. And that's really what it comes down to.
Thanks, Jay. Sheila, do you want to add to this as well?
Sure. Thanks very much for this. Yes. So we know that there was a list of about approximately 100 volunteers that came forward, really wanting to give everything they could to supporting the community and supporting the defense. And this is everything from getting out with chainsaws after areas had been cleared by heavy equipment, to providing support for food, to all kinds of logistics, refueling of water pumps. And so these people signed up and they've done tremendous work, and we're really, really appreciative. They also ended up really, we wanted to make sure that they weren't just seen as volunteer, and that lots of them came forward. We wanted to deem them as essential workers. So in whatever capacity they were doing things, it was under an official aegis. And so most of them were taken on through different contractors. There were about 20 that just had not necessarily been able to, their skill set perhaps didn't align with some of the needs at the time. And that was the reasoning behind the letter, to say to people, hey, you know what, if you're here, and this of course was on Saturday when we still had a full ZFO-15 was still considered to be out of control, that if people were here and they didn't have an official reason to be here, we encouraged them to consider what the evacuation order meant, so that they wouldn't necessarily be detracting from some of the other work underway. But people who have stayed to work and have been doing essential work, we fully respect what they've all been doing. Thanks.
Thanks, Sheila. Ollie?
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe a question for Jay. At the top of this press conference, we had a quote which reads as follows: "We don't have a date for when the fires will be declared under control and when it will be safe for community governments and the territory to welcome their residents." Is a fire being considered under control a trigger point for that? Because in the Northwest Territories, fires often need snow on them to be fully under control. Is that the marker that we're looking at here, or is being held potentially still a good enough scenario for people to come back to somewhere like Yellowknife? Thanks.
Go ahead, Jay.
What I would say is that it's not a matter of one variable, and I mentioned that there were several variables involved. I talked about that there were different considerations. So the status of the fire is probably the most important one, but not the only one. Is there a scenario where a fire could be considered held and a number of the other variables in the right situation to invite people back? I think that that's a possibility. I think that it comes down to the experts weighing in and putting their heads together, which is something that happens every day. Those meetings literally happen every day, where all of the factors and all of the considerations are put together. And this is why we're sort of having this discussion today, is to try and explain to people that if they see the fire and the fire is in one particular level or status, that's not the end of the conversation. Are there services for people to come back to? Can we get essential workers back in so that when people return, it is safe for them to do so? And safe meaning, if you are someone who needs medical services, those medical services need to be available for you, or else you are not in a safe position. But and maybe ECC wants to talk more about the threat of fires and what out of control versus the other statuses that they deem fires, and what that means to the risk assessment and the threat to communities.
Thanks, Jay. Jessica, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Jay kind of nailed most of what I would have said anyway. A lot of this has to do with it's a complicated kind of situation. Each fire is individual and unique. And so being held can be enough for one fire. Getting it up to being under control can be another one. We've had fires that have burned all season and be without going under control. The variables are very complex, and it's being done on the ground with each fire in isolation, like just to make sure we're making correct safety decisions. And I do know that the most important part is that we're erring on the side of caution. I know for myself and for the rest of the fire service and for the rest of the people working on this, we'd much rather be wrong and keep people safe than be too optimistic and get somebody hurt.
Thanks, Jessica. All right, CBC North, Natalie, go ahead.
Thanks. So we're hearing that, critical staff are being called back, or some of that work and identifying who needs to be called back is beginning. But are those critical staff members being invited back into the community? Or do we know when that would happen, or what needs to happen for those people to be invited back?
Sure. I think this is a Jay question and City of Yellowknife question. Sheila, do you want to speak to this one? Or Jay, you're already on. Go ahead.
Yes, I would just say that what I would say is that the planning process is absolutely underway. And so the discussions about who are essential workers and who needs to be back first. Those conversations are absolutely underway, and in some cases, those conversations would be being had with those essential workers as part of the planning process. I can't stress that enough, as part of the planning process. That leads to, deciding what the logistics need to be to have those people come back. So it still is a process, but that process is beginning, absolutely.
Thanks, Jay.
Thanks. And maybe I'll add to that. So Jay is right. There's a process underway. We've identified our staff. We're also working with a lot of the contractors who have remained in town. And if they have additional staff they need to bring back to be able to normalize services again. And then, of course, we're identifying the critical businesses to be able to bring everybody back. So a key part of that is for business owners, and to be able to identify who. We need a process then for those people to be authorized as essential workers, which is on the GNWT. They're organizing that process. And then, of course, for people to be able to have the time to be able to come back either by road if they drove out, or to make sure that there are flights available for them to come back. So we're hoping that this can happen as quickly as possible. Thanks.
Thanks, Sheila. Okay, we only have 5 minutes left. So I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get to all the hands, but I am going in order here. So Ollie, do you have a question?
So many. Right. Let me see what I can do here very quickly. What's the deal with the application process for the travel funding program, which we were told we would hear about very, very early this week?
Sure. William McKay?
Yeah, thanks, Aggie. So we have a portal that will kind of piggyback onto the income disruption application process. So you can apply for both those sets of funding in one application on the portal. So we were just looking it over today for final approval, and I'm hoping that it'll be go live on Tuesday afternoon, and you'll be able to get paid through direct deposit through that portal for both those programs. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Ian?
Yes, just piggybacking on that question. So once the portal is set up and once residents have applied, how long should it take for them to receive that direct deposit?
Sure. William?
Yeah, thank you, Aggie. We are hoping as soon as possible people will receive their payment. We are looking to redeploy people, or have started redeploying people to assist with processing of those applications. So I think the first payments for Hay River and Fort Smith have already gone out. So we've put out about 80 of those payments for the travel assistance, and the income disruption payments have been going out as people became eligible for them, and Yellowknife became eligible last week, as everyone knows. So lots of applications in there, and we're processing them as quickly as we can. So hoping that time will be reduced over the next week or so once we get more people into that office. Thank you.
Thank you. Nasima?
Sorry about that. Yeah, I just want to go back on the fire to try to figure out which one have been held and not. So can you tell me if Hay River is held, and the one in Yellowknife, I think I figured that out, but it's still Hay River. I don't understand what's going on there.
Sure. So for the Hay River one, Jessica, can you speak to that? And then we'll let Fane speak to the Yellowknife fire very quickly.
Let Fane go first, please.
Sure. Fane, go ahead. Oh, sorry, Fane, you're cutting out. You're cutting out here. Maybe try turning off your camera, and we'll just try the audio.
Okay, how am I coming in?
Yeah.
Test.
Good.
Okay,
Go ahead.
so just tracking back to Fire 15, which is the fire that is of highest priority, about 17 kilometers to the west-northwest of Yellowknife. As of this morning, that fire is classified as being held. So basically, being held indicates that with currently committed resources, sufficient suppression action that has been taken, that the wildfire is not likely to spread beyond existence or predetermined boundaries. under prevailing and forecasting conditions. So we haven't seen that over the last 7 days, like I had mentioned earlier in the meeting here. We did see a little bit of rain over those days, cooler weather, the winds were in our favor, so it allowed us to go into these fires safely so that we could get on the line with our personnel, which we have right across the eastern portion of the fire and also near the community of Betchico. So we've made significant strides in that part, as I mentioned before. And again, that's with our Type 1 personnel, Canadian Forces, Type 3 personnel, and the personnel from the NWT, along with Rotary Wing and our fixed wing. And I just have to say also, to add to this, there are days where we do have some issues in regards to being able to fly. Most of those helicopters do move our staff into those fires, but sometimes with the heavy smoke, we don't have the visibility, so that does hamper our efforts in being able to get on these fires. So those days that you don't see our air tankers flying, that's usually due to the visibility. And I can also speak to that to Hay River, that we did offer resources to Hay River. We just haven't been able to get them there due to the heavy smoke of the region. We do have tankers on standby here in Yellowknife along with helicopters. But again, that visibility is right low. It makes it very unsafe for our aircraft to move through that. So we just want to make sure, as we've always said, and the first thing for us is safety. So we want to make sure that's paramount for what we do before we go in. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Vane. Okay, I am going to close this now because it is 5 o'clock. So thank you to our panel and to media for your questions. We are planning to have another press conference on Thursday at 4 o'clock. So of course, wait for that media advisory to come out because things might change. Media, if you have any further questions, please reach out to the appropriate department. Or if you have a question for the minister, for a minister or a premier, email press secretary. Thank you very much and take care.